Yo, 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 welcome to another edition of the Geeky Bros podcast. I'm your boy Tactix.
Yeah, it's just Darcy here.
This is Big Geek Umar. How y'all doing today?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
I was like, is anyone going to respond?
Well, I was responding. I just wasn't speaking. I was shaking my head and smiling with the giddy glee for this episode right here. I'm excited for all the topics today.
Yeah, as am I. How about you, T? Are you excited?
I'm like lukewarm about it.
Yo, that's you know what your tagline is? Meh. Like there's been a lot of what'd you think of that? Meh.
No, he has a catchphrase. Bro, I don't care.
Don't care.
Yeah, I don't give
Don't
a shit. Facts.
All right, Umar, what's on the agenda for today?
All right, so we're going to jump right into our first topic, which is something we've been wanting to talk about for quite a while, and I know we're slightly behind the times, but, we're making up for it right now. We all three have watched The Suicide Squad. Let's try that again, and this time let's do a better job. So, we have all watched The Suicide Squad movie, and we are now going to review the hell out of it. So, I gotta say, personally, this was the first movie I saw in theaters since COVID started. So for me, this is kind of a big deal. So let's just say that there's a 0.5 extra mark towards this film just because I saw it in theaters. But that's a big change from like my actual review. But before we get to that, I definitely want to hear what my bros thought, because we've basically not talked about this for 2 weeks. So T, let's start with you. What did you think?
Okay, so upon first glance, my initial reaction straight out of the gate, I gave it an 8. I saw it with Darcy. I really liked the action. It was far superior to what we originally got like a couple of years back. Like by far. So I really
in the name really does make the difference.
Yeah. So it was solid. I have to say honestly, it dropped 0.5 for me just as I kind of let it marinate a little bit, just because, and that's not taking anything really away from the movie. I usually base my ratings on like one of the strong points that I make in regards to how I rate my movies is rewatchability, right? If I'm able to go back and I'm eager to watch it again, right? Mm-hmm. This, I feel like some time could pass before I rush to go see it again. It was enjoyable. It gave me what I needed. It washed the bad taste out of my mouth from the previous film, which is what I wanted. I went in with low expectations, and those expectations were far surpassed. So I had a good time. It was a good time at the movie. I enjoyed a lot of the characters. It was funny how expendable a lot of them were, but I mean, we went in with that expectation anyway. It was just funny how everything kind of played out, because you were like, prior to us watching the movie, me and Darcy were kind of trying to guess which ones would like bite the bullet.
And you guys were pretty close.
For the most part, we were pretty spot on, especially with the weasel at the end. Spoiler alert. Darcy definitely called that one. But yeah,
when it's like, did anyone check if like Weasel can swim? And Waller's just like.
Yeah, and I love how it really shows like the normal like office bureaucracy crap. Like people forget to do things in their job all the time, and it's just like, and it's like, whose job was that? Not mine.
Yeah, but speaking to that note though, I like how the side characters in the office got a little bit of time to shine. It was like James Gunn really kind of, he gave credit to every single person in the movie, even if they were only on screen for a short amount of time. Like everyone kind of got their own chance to shine, and they all had kind of memorable moments, which was pretty solid, right? Everyone kind of had a role to play, even if they were expendable, which I found to be really intriguing. I realized that John Cena, these types of movies are the perfect roles for him. Like, I can't take him seriously outside of anything to do with this genre, and it threw me off when it was kind of like a bait and switch type of thing with him, like at the end when he became kind of like, I mean, they're all villains, but I mean, yeah, the villain kind of thing. that kind of threw me off a little bit, and it took me out of the moment a little bit, because prior to this I'd seen Fast 9, and he's fucking terrible in that movie, like just atrocious. Like, I can't take him seriously as a action hero yet. Like, I feel like he's trying to be what The Rock is now, but that ain't it. Like, he's not there yet. You know what I mean? I don't know if he will be. I think he just needs to stay in his lane, because I just don't buy him in that role. But this, when he's like cracking jokes, he's hilarious. So if like, and I hear they're doing a TV series based off of his character. So if they keep it within this tone and they don't try to make it into this action hero, the typical action hero type of thing, I think I could buy into it and I'd be interested in checking it out. But if they try to make it really serious and like go that action hero route type of thing, I think I'm just gonna check out. I'm be like, fuck this, I'm not into it. But yeah, overall, I found the movie really enjoyable. I was surprised at who they killed off, like this dude, the guy at the bottom below Idris Elba. Yeah. I was surprised that they killed him off. I was like, yo, like that's, and Boomerang. I was kind of surprised that they killed him off too. I was not expecting that.
When that happened, I was like, oh.
Yeah,
what?
But I guess it's like not really much for him to do. I mean, the motherfucker just throws boomerangs. He ain't Captain America. He ain't that nice. So like, I get it. But yeah, I love Harley Quinn in this. She's probably one of my favorite characters in this, alongside Idris. Idris, I think, killed it. Reminded me a lot of he reminded me of Will Smith in that regard, and I would love to see them go toe to toe and see who comes out on top, kind of thing.
I think the reason why Idris was in the role is because Will Smith said no, and so therefore instead of recasting him, they decided to get like a carbon copy of his character.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, this movie didn't do that well, like, you know, in the box office, which is unfortunate, because, and I think COVID has a lot to do with it, but also because John Campy was saying too, and I agree with him, it, like, a lot of people, the title is kind of confusing, because it's like, okay, we had Suicide Squad and then we had The Suicide Squad. Is it the same thing? Is it a prequel? Is it a sequel? Is it just a rehash or a retelling or a reboot? Like, I don't want to sit through another one of these kinds of garbage movies again. Like, so I think that kind of did it a disservice in that regard, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's my overall take. I think I gave it a 7.5 overall. I enjoyed it.
Okay. Darcy?
All right, so as Tex said, we saw it together without Umar, because, you know, we ain't all that tight apparently. But
I was wondering if that was going to come up.
You know that was coming up, okay? So right at the gate in the theater, I gave it an 8. I want to say since then it's become an 8.5. I feel like this is a film I will want to put on a semi-regular basis. Like, just like it's a lot of fun for me. What, as Tactix said, as everybody has said, this movie blew the other one out the way. I'm gonna steal from Tactix words. This washed the bad taste out of my mouth, but did it with a bottle of acid. This movie is hella fun. Let me see. Let me go on a couple of things. So John Cena, one, I'm gonna go back in that Fast and Furious 9 thing. Yeah, he's trash in the role, but the role is trash, and so is the movie. So, in all fairness, I'm gonna give my man John Cena credit for just like, I don't know, like standing on a twig that's on a foundation that's crumbling. Like, it's just,
yeah.
It's not,
but just based off of his other movies, I just can't take the motherfucker serious. Like, I just don't see him in that kind of. He's not at Rock level yet. I know Rock started off with some corny movies and he kind of worked himself up, so maybe John Cena will get there, but I don't know. It's that's not it. He don't got it yet.
I feel you, and I do feel that John Cena is still an actor who needs to be put in a position where the director is hands-on with the vision, and and like, I was watching the behind the scenes today about this film, and they're saying like how I got John Cena's name in my head. Who's the director of the film?
James
How James Gunn is really actually involved. Like before they even get to filming, he's working with like the people who do the set design, the people who do the costume design, making sure these things actually work well together, make sure they're communicating. By the time they're on set, he's still like helping with lighting. He's helping with like the clothing stuff. He's on with the actors, working with them. And I think when you have John Cena scenario where like the oh, sorry, I just like cut out for a second there. When you have him on set with a director who is really like hands-on and guiding, I think that he's probably at the level where like he still needs that. But when you have something for Fast and Furious 9 where that whole film feels like, you know, people show up in a day, do a thing, and leave, and nobody knows what's like gonna happen. Like no one's communicating, no one's like interconnected. I just don't think he's got the chops to be able to hold it together in that scenario. But anyways, I loved him in this role. I was actually really impressed. I was just impressed with everybody as a whole. Like I just really enjoyed this film. Yes, I called it with Weasel. He's a weasel. He's gonna make it through. I was not surprised with what is it? What's his name? Captain Flags?
Colonel Flag.
Colonel Flag. I was not surprised because like there's so him and then you know John Cena's character and Idris's character, they all have so much similarity that like they all have to be taken out in some kind of way, like someone like they all can't persist through. And I also felt like a lot of the characters besides Harley from the original have to go. Like Captain Boomerang, like that guy, I knew he was gonna go. He was either gonna go one of two ways. Either they're gonna treat it like the cartoon version where he almost makes it and doesn't make it, or he was gonna go right away. And I loved how they did it. They're just like, oh, this is what his boomerang is like. That's wicked, and he's dead. Like, it's just like you're like, oh, that's a really cool technique. Too bad we ain't gonna see that anymore. Okay, moving on. Yeah, like there's just I was actually surprised that King Shark made it through the whole freaking film.
Yo, but there was some close moments with him though. I thought he was gonna bite the bullet several times, so I was surprised.
I thought for sure twice. I'm like, he did.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm so glad to see that he made it through. I really hope to see him in other properties. Like, I'd love to just see him show up in something that's more serious, and that character will just constantly be comic relief because it's so stupid in a moment where everybody else is like really intense, and then he'll just be like, and he'd be like.
Now, did they purposely dumb him down though? Because I don't remember the character being. Like,
I think there was a certain
like
element of dumbing him down to make him endearing and yeah, but like I don't think he's exactly like mind-blowingly intelligent. But I don't know King Shark very well.
I think the different iterations we've seen him be more beastly. Is the description of where they put it, where it's more of like more of a beast's mind than a man's mind. But the Harley Quinn show is where they completely flip that character upside down, and I think that impression is so strong that you want him to be more intelligent. But I don't think in most iterations I've seen he's more like a raging character, like of like aggression, and like they play off of the like, you know, when a shark smells blood. And that's a big part of his character. Whereas in this one, like they have that, but they have a lot more fun with it. But yeah, overall, this movie started as an 8 and it is 8.5 for me.
Nice. Okay, so from my perspective, I loved it. I'm gonna just agree, like to say all across the board, we all thought it was a vast improvement. I felt the first scene was better than the entirety of the first film.
Yeah.
So like I loved it. I gave it an 8.5. Now I will say that that's mostly because I was like, like that 0.5 is probably because I was watching it in theater and it was really nice to be back in, you know, even with a mask on. But anyway, so yeah, loved it. John Cena, I love him. He's great. He's fantastic. I will say I had a different perspective on him than yours, Tactix. Like I think you're right. He has found his sweet spot in superhero and action. I would say not superhero, but in action comedy, he nails it. Like every time, I love John Cena. He's amazing. However, at the end of the Suicide Squad, when he turned into the villain, he went from being like the funny guy to, for me, being a legitimate threat that was like, you can't get around. Like, he was throwing Flag around like a rag doll, and I was like, fuck. And then he killed Flag, and I was like, wait, what? So yeah, I'm gonna have to say that like, I think John Cena can do a villain role, just he needs to have proper script and director. I think he has it. Anyway,
Fast 9 killed it for me. I'm sorry. I need at least one more movie where he does a good job and it's a well-written script for me to jump on board with the rest of you guys, because
enough.
it's not there for me yet.
I'm kind of glad I didn't see Fast 9 now, because like, I don't want my John Cena love to go away.
Skip it, bro. Skip it.
Oh, I'm going.
Absolutely skip it. But Tactix, I'm gonna hit you one more time with this one. I watched that film and I'm like, I didn't feel he did a trash job any more than Vin Diesel did a trash job. Like, I feel like he was on par.
Yeah, but Vin Diesel's okay. That's fair, but Vin Diesel's been consistent, bro. Like, we expect trash from him. Like, am I lying, bro?
Like, no, absolutely. But it's just like, I want to give the guy credit, because when I watched him in that role, I was like, he's playing that role perfectly. That role sucks, but he's playing it perfectly. like I just like, I've liked him ever since I saw him in, what was that movie?
Pitch Black.
What's that?
Pitch Black.
No, you're talking about John Cena.
No, John Cena. Ever since
Trainwreck.
Was it that one? The one where he showed up and he was like, it was him, Mark Hamill, and somebody else. He was basically like, there was Mark Hamill and what's his name? Will Ferrell. It's like there's a movie with all three of them. It's like Will Ferrell is like the.
Oh, you mean Mark Wahlberg?
Mark Wahlberg, yeah. Sorry, Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Mark
That makes a lot more sense, because I'm like, why did Mark Hamill?
Yeah, I was like, Mark.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, you see how I struggle with names. But anyways, it was like supposed to be like the Mark Wahlberg is like the other guy who's cooler, like a stepdad than that of Will Ferrell.
I know.
And then John Cena shows up at the end. It's like a very small thing, but I'm like, oh, I like him, and he's really good in comedy. It wasn't action comedy, and I loved him in that.
In comedy, like Trainwreck, he had me on the floor laughing.
Yeah, I got to watch that one. I can't remember if I've seen it or not. But anyways.
Oh, he's hilarious in that one.
Yeah. Oh my god. Like, honestly, like,
I will enter you. He's like, what the fuck?
It's like, you're gonna enter me? What? It's like you're coming off as rapey. Anyway, so yeah, like John Cena, like both in comedy and in action and in villainy. For me, this movie proved to me that he can do shit. He's got range. Other notable things were two actors. One, this is obvious, but like Viola Davis is Amanda Waller. She is the Wall, and like I believe it because she believes it. Like, she was the only good thing that came out from the last movie that they kept in this one.
And Harley Quinn. Not her character, but her acting.
Don't get me wrong. I agree with all of your like announcements about like Harley Quinn and about Flag and like about the King Shark. All those I completely agree with. For me, is separate from that is Amanda Waller, and the second guy, even though this has completely caught me by surprise, was Polka-Dot Man. Like, David Dastmalchian is a really underrated actor. Like, he's been in a ton of shit. Like, he was in The Dark Knight. I think that was his breakout role. He was in The Dark Knight. He's in Ant-Man and Ant-Man 2. He's in The Suicide Squad, and he I think he was in like he's in another movie that I can't place. Anyway, him. My man, like, he was both weird, endearing, and also kind of worrisome. Like, he felt like an incel member who wasn't quite aware that he was incel. But at the same time, he had like may have been gay. I'm not sure. Like, his concern over that one character. What was his name?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's just like, they killed him, and it's like, and Idris Elba is like,
he's been with us the whole time. How do you not remember him?
And he was like, he's still with us, and I was like, oh yeah, this movie, had a huge cast. It killed all of them, but all in like
almost
all of them. It like I mean, for crying out loud, they made Starro both sympathetic and terrifying. Like that scene in the laboratory with the guy who's like Doctor Who. That was some chilling ass shit that was happening in there, because you know the kind of fucked up stuff that they did in that like that torture chamber with all those people, and I'm just like, okay, so that's how they did Starro.
Yep. Yeah, and that guy's name is the Thinker.
The Thinker, thank you. That was it. But I just remember because he's a Doctor Who. He's one of the Doctor Who's. Anyway,
yep.
Yeah. Hands down, this movie was badass. Loved it. I was laughing from beginning to end. They killed Nathan Fillion in the funniest way, and yeah, that scene was fucked up. The fact that like Harley did that, and then a bunch of rats followed her, and I'm just like, what the fuck am I watching? But at the same time, and what I loved about this movie was you can compare this to like Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, and you can see this movie, James Gunn has been given complete free reign, and look how good it was.
And by the way, I'm glad you called out Nathan Fillion and his death. That death killed me, because it was like, at first I was like, which part of him are they shooting? Like his body or his arms? And I realized they're shooting his arms, and he's freaking out because his arms are being shot from a distance. And I'm like, oh, so his nerve endings still work that far?
He has the most useless power.
Oh my god, it is the worst power ever. It's so disgusting. It's so unnecessary. And I'm like thinking, like, when is this ever useful? Like, when was there ever a scenario? Like, what comic strip was he's like, so my arm snuck it. Like, I guess it's like the only thing this guy's good for is like unlocking doors that nobody else can get through. You know what I mean? Like,
or strangling someone who doesn't see, like, to like, be able to strangle someone like without them knowing you're approaching.
Oh, you know what this guy is like. What was that movie with Idle Hands? It's like it's like Idle Hands 3.0. Like, it's just so stupid. The detachable kid. All I can detach is arms. I mean, I'm glad I don't get to see anything else attached. That'd be disgusting. But anyways, yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So So 8.5 out of 10 for me. It was great to watch it. Great to see James Gunn unleashed. Great to see everyone, and like, yeah, loved it. So, moving on. So, the next topic is going to be also something that I've been looking forward to talking to both of you about. The MCU/Disney Plus has released its next fourth Marvel Cinematic Universe TV series, aka What If. I was like initially kind of excited for it, and then after watching Loki and seeing how it ended and knowing that it was going to tie directly into What If, I was like, yo, I'm actually really excited for this. The first 2 episodes have been dropped last week and this week, and if you haven't watched this week's, we're going to talk about it, so like, skip ahead to the next topic. But yeah, what did you guys think of the first 2 episodes? Darcy, let's start with you.
So I saw there was some like hate online for the first episode, and then a bunch of people were like, second episode's much better. I liked the first episode. I loved Peggy Carter's her name, right? Captain Carter. Yeah, but I mean, like,
oh yeah, Peggy. Yeah, it's Peggy.
Yeah. I love seeing Peggy Carter become like Captain America. I love the play on, well, not play, but like the recognition of scenarios where men won't see women as powerful, and how she's unbelievably powerful. Like, there was, I forget whose interaction was, but they're like, oh, what are you gonna do? And she like just destroys the person. But then I love when she's like rescuing Bucky and all of them from the jail, and the Irish dude with like the handlebar mustache, I love his interaction. He's like oh, but he's like, this something about you. He's like, what are you gonna do? And he like beats somebody down and rips the door off with like one hand. He's like, got it. It was just like that small interaction, like, that's exactly, it's like, yep, you take the lead, like, no questions asked, I get it, yep, I know what you're doing. Right. I was a little bummed in the first episode that we weren't really getting Chris Evans' voice on Captain Rogers. Well, not Captain Rogers, I can't think of his first name right now. Steve Rogers. But I'm pretty sure like it wasn't his voice, and if it was, it didn't sound like him. Like, it just sounded like a complete.
I think it was his voice.
did not sound like him to me. It sounded like somebody else throughout the whole episode.
They probably did that purposely because he's not the
as
full
powerful,
flesh.
yeah.
Yeah, but there's still like a softness to his voice that I felt was missing in the character. But regardless, overall,
actually, you're right. It's Josh Keaton. It's skinny Steve Rogers.
Yeah, it did not sound like Chris Evans. And I know Chris Evans could voice act his way into sounding meek. He did it before. I'm sure he wouldn't be able to. He'd be able to pull that off again. So that's the only thing that bummed me out in the first episode. I enjoyed it, but the second episode, I really enjoyed the second episode. Now I just wanted to say like I still enjoyed the first one for exactly what it was supposed to be, but the second one. So I was telling Tactix this like last night. The thing I loved, and spoiler alert to anyone who's not seen this yet. So this is the one where T'Challa is picked up by the Ravagers instead of what's his name, who's
Peter
originally Star. Yeah, Peter Quill. So he's picked up, and the thing I loved about this was like the philosophy, or not philosophy, but like I can't think of the word for it, but the like analysis of like showing how much a person and their personality can affect all the people around them. Yeah. Tactix, you've seen this episode, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just make sure because I you hadn't seen it when we were talking about it last night. So like how much it was like the Ravagers became people of good because they were with T'Challa, and how Thanos became part of the crew. I like the Thanos was like, what? I love right out of the gate. What's his name on the far left? He's like Star-Lord, and he's like so excited. I was like, wait, what? Like this universe is different right out of the gate. Yeah, Korth. And he's like, yeah, no, it's like the dental sucks or whatever. It's like I could be open for new opportunities. And when he gets knocked out, he's like lying there like super happy, like, oh, I've been knocked out by Star-Lord. This is amazing. Like, and just like how much, like, even when they brought it to the end and they had this nice tie off with his father, and his father's like, so how did my son come in, like you come in possession of my son or whatever, and he's like, I was lost and he found me. Like how much the T'Challa character, even though he was taken as a young child when he was in his more exploratory phase and didn't become the king, how much the king was still in him, even though he's like a different person with different experiences, and how much his natural goodness, how it changed everybody around him. And they're still like just a fun crew that they were, but with a different purpose. I loved that fact. Yeah, Thanos, that
killed me. I burst out laughing when that happened. I was like, are you kidding me? He actually, and the thing is, it's still there. Like he's like, no, it's random. It's efficient, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, he keeps pushing the efficient line all the way down to Wakanda. She's like, I'm pretty sure that's genocide. Yeah, but it's efficient. Oh man, that was really fun. That actually makes me excited to see what else they do, because of like taking the change of a personality in a situation and how much that changes it. Because with Peggy and Steve Rogers, it wasn't that much of a flip. They were much more similar people, and it made me also realize how much the original Star-Lord character, again I'm forgetting the name, Peter Quill, how much he was a passive go along with things, and he's not like, even though he's confident in himself, he doesn't really demand what people are going to do, and even when he does, it's still like sleazy and all that kind of stuff. It really put that character in that perspective. Like I almost felt like originally, like, well, the circumstances made him the way he was. They didn't. They had a lot more to do with who he was, and that creating the circumstances. Because when T'Challa came in, circumstances changed.
I completely agree with you with that. I will say there's a small caveat in that T'Challa came from like his civilization is probably 2 centuries ahead of Peter's.
Yeah, 100%.
So there is some element of him not, like, he was at a significantly more disadvantaged state, and also he was supremely less educated.
Fair, all very fair, 100%. It's just,
I hear you though. I'm with you.
it's in the point of like, you know, the circumstances aren't the only factor to you know, like T'Challa you thought was going to be something similar to Star-Lord and you weren't sure about it. It's like, no, he is still T'Challa. He's like 80% the same person. And yes, the circumstances beforehand had a factor in it, but a lot of time had passed and a lot could have changed him, and he changed everything around him. He was still a king. He was just a king in a different way.
Yeah, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like your circumstances do play a big part in who you ultimately become at the end of the day, because when we look at Peter, like I agree with you, Umar, in the sense of like T'Challa came from royalty, so he already had a lot of those principles instilled upon him when he was taken, right? And so at that point,
he was expected to be king too.
Yeah, so he already had that kind of regalness to him. So I think he was going to carry that on because, you know, I do a lot of studying in terms of like the brain and shit like that, and they say that from the moment that you're born to the age of 7, you're pretty much malleable, right? Your brain is malleable. You're like a sponge, and you absorb everything that's around you. And then after that point, after the age of 7, your brain becomes less plastic in the sense that it's harder for it to change and to be influenced, and you're pretty much set in your ways by that point. And I think both T'Challa and Peter Quill in both their timelines were captured after the age of 7, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so I think, at that point, however they were brought up is basically who they were ultimately going to become, and any kind of circumstances that they were subjected to was going to shape and mold them regardless, but it was always going to be ultimately different, right? That's why you can have like a set of twins who grew up in the same kind of environment, but then they go their separate ways, and then like based off of like how they were treated in terms of their parents, how they were viewed or whatever like that, can ultimately lead them to different paths, right? So yeah, I think it was just interesting to see the parallel and how different it was based off of how they spent the first couple years of their lives, right? Obviously T'Challa still came from royalty, was brought up a certain way with a certain set of beliefs and things of that nature, whereas Peter Quill, you know, we don't really know what we do know what his circumstances were. Like his mom was sick. It might have been different in this universe or this depiction or whatever. From a small town and everything, and then got captured, had to fend for himself. Life was rough for him, and it kind of shaped and molded him further based off of all the things that that were already instilled on him from a young child. So, yeah.
What did you think of the first film? What's the first episode?
First episode, I liked them both. Honestly, I didn't find a problem with the Captain America one or Captain Carter. I loved how they depicted it. I loved how they put some respect on women in that regard, and showed Peggy in that strong light. I enjoyed what they did with Steve, because I thought that once he had gotten shot, he was going to kind of be a throwaway character, and they weren't ever
died for a second.
Yeah, I thought he died too. And then it was interesting when they brought him in as like Iron Man, or like the what was it, the German Stomper or something like that, or the Nazi Stomper or something, or I can't remember what it was, something Stomper, right? But then when he got captured, or when he Hydra Stomper, yeah. So when the explosion went off in the train, you know what I thought was going to happen? I thought that they were going to find his body, and he was going to become the Winter Soldier. I thought that's where they were going with it, and then they went in a different direction. So I was like, okay, because there were so many surprises. I wasn't expecting the Iron Man thing, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I like how they tied that in, and then he got lost. He got into the explosion, and then they were infiltrating Hydra, and I thought that, like, you know, when we saw the Hydra Stomper hung up like this, but it was like kind of open, I was like, oh fuck, what if they transformed him into the Winter Soldier, and he's actually in the suit, and he comes out and he's got this fucking new like arm that got blown off from the explosion. I thought that's where they were gonna go with it, and I was hyped for it. And then that part was kind of a letdown for me, but overall I still enjoyed the episode as a whole. But I gotta agree with Darcy. My favorite is by far the second episode with T'Challa and how that whole thing played off. And yeah, Darcy, you were right. The whole Thanos thing caught me off guard. I was working out and watching it, and I nearly dropped my weight. I was like, wait, what? What the fuck is going on? Like, why is he here? So yeah, but I love that, and like that whole thing about it's efficient. Like that was hilarious. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm excited to see where they go with it. They kind of allude to Peter Quill's story. I don't know if they're gonna like pick up from there and address that further, or if that's kind of just like
I think it's going to be another episode.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to see how that kind of pans out. And yeah, I'm loving the series so far. It's an interesting new take on the stories that we're already familiar with and where they can go and how they can take certain liberties. And the fact that it's in an animation form means that they can do a little bit more with it in terms of the action and give us a little bit more. I mean, granted, the episodes are relatively short, so there's a lot to jam pack into like a 30-minute, 40-minute episode. But from what we've gotten so far, I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, solid all around.
Yeah, like so for me, I actually agree with both of you. I'm enjoying both. I liked the second one more than the first one, but before I saw the second one, I was loving the first one. I am a huge fan of Captain Carter, and I loved the fact that like I really hope they do like a live version of her, because so the one thing I will say that is completely unavoidable, and like there's no solution to this problem, but the episodes are a little surface level more than I would want. Like they're creating such amazing situations and amazing like stories that I would want like a full length feature on each of them. Like Captain Carter, the only thing that bothered me was the fact that it was so short, and like we're not going to be able to get more of it. The same thing, especially when I watched Star-Lord T'Challa, I was like, this I would love to see a full film, and like and just to kind of like see him growing up, but also seeing him like in the end result. But like, you know, again, it's not, you can't get around that. I have to say that saw a lot of people online kind of like being like, oh my god, Captain Carter is stopping a tank by herself. Steve never do that. They're just giving her like more power than Steve to politicize the situation. I'm like, okay, Steve was a 90-pound dude who could barely pick up a broom, and then got turned into this big hulking guy who's like super powered. Peggy Carter is a literal military like operative, a sort of like I would say like a borderline spy. You give her super soldier serum, she gonna get bigger and she gonna get even stronger. So
it's relative to their starting weight.
And that's how I see
and
it.
Their strength. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like, yeah, and so she was already like, for a woman, especially at that time, she was pretty like solid, and she could take guys on. Giving her super soldier serum, she gonna get strong, and like, yeah, I believe when she takes down planes like they're nothing, and like taking out and stopping a full truck by herself. So go home, incel buddies, like just cry yourself to sleep if you need to. I cannot wait. Buddies. Yeah, and like I cannot wait to see like the like cosplays from this series. Like I cannot wait to see Star-Lord T'Challa. I cannot wait to see Captain Carter, and just be like, yo, that's awesome. Going to the second episode, I knew I was gonna like this when I saw that it was T'Challa. I'm like, okay, I want to hear Chadwick Boseman's voice for the first time since his passing. I'm gonna like this episode. And then I saw the episode, I'm like, the fucking feels, especially after watching all of it, seeing him come home with his dad, seeing that he, like you said, Darcy, like I was lost and he found me, and then ending with the dedication to him, with the music playing. I was like, it's 6:30 in the morning and I'm gonna start crying. So yeah, I like, there was weight, because, and I also read that so Chadwick Boseman pushed to be the first person to do his voice acting, because he felt he's told them he was so excited to play more of T'Challa, and you know now that he just wanted to have more given to the world from him. Like he still had one more story to tell, and I'm just like, oh man, you.
Yeah.
So so I loved it, and like it pulled my heartstring. The fact that T'Challa, when given the opportunity, can actually talk Thanos down.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
y'all should have just led with that in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
like,
Well, I was thinking about that, but by the time the two of them had a chance to see each other, like, did they even see each other in Infinity War, or did
he punched him in the face.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if he was at that final battle or if he got held back by something else.
Yeah, like he had 5 stone.
But yeah, by the time they ever had a chance to interact, there was no time for diplomacy. Like T'Challa was not going into that situation with a conversation. Like he just, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah, if they had met earlier on in his path when he didn't have all the stuff, yeah, like, and also like by the time they probably met, he'd already had such an influence on the Ravengers that he had a reputation, and Thanos was probably more interested in the conversation because like, how is this guy changing all these people? You know what? He wants a conversation. I'll entertain a conversation, right? Like I want to see if he can change me, and then he changes me. You're like, okay, you did it.
I also love the fact that he goes. He's like, I'm trying to get him and his daughter into therapy, but they're fighting it. Now I'm just like,
yeah. I love seeing what's her name? Like his daughter in like completely the opposite. Maybe, and not like torn apart, but like gorgeous and beautiful. And I was like, man, damn, that's a lot that was done to her. Like, cause I've never seen her differently. So, damn, like he really messed her up. Like we know he messed her up, but now seeing a comparison, it hurts. Yeah. Like it's like he only got started, and then T'Challa came around, and that's how much damage was done. Just the eye.
Think of it this way: it's like Thanos. It's like oh wait, hold up. Yeah. So the way what's his name, Endeavor from My Hero Academia, where he's like now trying to make up for all the years of abuse he gave to his family, versus him not giving a crap. But anyway, yeah. So I would say that like. Nonetheless, I loved both episodes, and yeah, I'm looking forward to more. I just wish that they were longer and like we got more like substance. But like this episode, I got substance. The first one felt more surface level.
Yeah, I felt like they're rushing the entire like Captain America, like First Avenger story quickly, whereas this one felt like a shorter, and it was like a new story, so they didn't have to like rush over like plot points that we already know. This one felt like it was a more condensed story to a specific point, and had more depth to it.
Yeah. All right. So now moving on to our final topic, which is one I'm pretty excited for. But first off, let's shout out to Mac Graham, who's tuned in late but still stoked to be here. We're happy to have you. And we are going to start our final discussion topic, which is something that came rather interestingly to me, and I kind of like put it in the group chat, and I'm like, hey, let's make a topic out of it. So a friend of mine sent me a picture of Giancarlo Esposito as Professor Charles Xavier, and Denzel Washington as Magneto. And actually, let me see if I can get the comment that was done underneath it. So what the comment was saying was, sorry, one moment, bear with me, and
it's good. That's a good looking photo right there, though.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. Okay, so it says Giancarlo Esposito as Professor X, Denzel as Magneto. This is from Andrew Wanrose, so well done, man. Both black men who came of age in the American Civil Rights era. One espouses the philosophy of unity and solidarity of human and mutant of all demographics, the other a militant mutant supremacist and terrorist due to some form of suffering from police or the KKK during his childhood and becoming the exact thing he claims to despise. So this is kind of this person's idea of how to reframe X-Men to have black characters be a modern day version of Professor Xavier and Magneto. So this got me thinking, and like another group chat I was in, I kind of mentioned it, and they were talking about how they would actually be interested in if the MCU were to do that, because they have gotten tired of my cousin Najim brought this up, is like basically Professor Xavier is white privilege form of peace. And that stuck with me for a second. I was like, huh. So and then I remembered Stan Lee had said that Professor Xavier and also Magneto were modeled after Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So that led me to a question that I'm now going to pose here. And also, if you're all watching, please feel free to comment. Is X-Men cultural appropriation?
So, I guess I'm answering first. Tactix like, I don't want to take this.
Nope.
There you go.
You ain't canceling me today, internet.
Okay, so is it cultural appropriation? I don't think it's technically cultural appropriation, but I do feel like there's a level of white privilege going on in terms of what's happening. So technically, like, it would be more cultural appropriation if they actually took something specifically from the culture and then just use it in their own way without any genuine authenticity to what the origin is. Modeling characters after inspiration from other characters isn't really cultural appropriation, right?
Fair.
But is it that it does some level of disservice to, like, what I feel like, and I'm obviously not Stan Lee and the other gentleman who created these characters originally, but my feeling is like, okay, they saw the civil rights movement and they liked either the ideology of these two things, and they wanted to put two characters face against each other, so they want to take that ideology, or they wanted to create empathy amongst like the larger community, being white people included, by modeling some of these ideas of these two real life people, and then they're using it under white characters. At the time, that would make a lot of sense to try to get the message across, but it does a disservice in that it gets the message across, but only in a white story, right? Yeah. So if the goal was also to have empathy for black people, you're going to fail because you don't have any black people in those roles. You don't have anything that's true to black people's stories. You took the ideology of these two characters and you place it over white people's struggle, being the Jewish struggle, mixed with, like, in terms of Magneto being a Jewish individual against the
Holocaust
Nazis
survivor.
And the Holocaust survivor, right? And so all of that stuff, and that's a legit, solid, like, story and way to bring that character and bring a lot of empathy. I mean, I've felt it every single time I've seen it. But is it cultural appropriation? No, but it does a disservice to the Malcolm X and Martin Luther King story, from my opinion.
Because like, first of all, you're vilifying Malcolm X's position.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he was as extreme as Magneto. So kind of like using him as a backdrop and saying so, that's essentially saying that, like, yeah, like, and to be fair, Magneto has been seen as an anti-hero, but also as like on occasion a hero, but predominantly he's been seen as a villain, like, or the negative view. And wait, Malcolm X was a Muslim too, wasn't he? So yeah, it's like, it's Islamophobic if you're going to turn his view as the villainous.
And I'm not a historian on Malcolm X, so with a grain of salt here. But the one thing I will say is that his statement of "by all means necessary" wasn't as extreme as Magneto's, which is like the eradication of the human race through either forcing them to be mutants or whatever variation of the storytelling that they did. It by any means necessary to protect your people, to have your community, wasn't like, and we're gonna get nuclear bombs and destroy the rest of the world and leave only black people on the planet. It wasn't to that level. So yeah, it does vilify it, which is also maybe a way that, like, why they wouldn't make it as clearly about the civil rights. and make it more about just the ideology of somebody who has a by any means necessary, and put that in an extreme fashion, and then somebody who doesn't believe in the exact same message, but they both have a similar end goal in some way or another. Of course, Magneto is a little bit more polarized.
Yeah, one last topic before I come to you, Tactix. I was also thinking about it today myself, and so my cousin Najim, who was saying that, like, Professor Xavier is kind of like white privilege version of peace, and I kind of see where he's coming from, because he's kind of viewing it like, I think actually you brought it up. We've had this conversation in a previous podcast, mostly talking about James McAvoy's Professor X versus Magneto, where that McAvoy is like, or Professor X in general, he kind of just chills and lets a lot of atrocities take place, and polices his own people to keep them from scaring those in power, which I can kind of see as being a disservice to the oppressed, because you're basically telling the oppressed to continue to be oppressed, and it's your responsibility to make peace, even though you're still being oppressed and killed. So what do you think of all of this?
Talking to me?
Yeah, sorry. I was like,
okay.
My bad.
Well, okay. So to answer to the original question, I don't think it's cultural appropriation. I think these characters were loosely based on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and I think right now, especially if they were to make these characters black, I think this would be an appropriate time. I think back then, this concept wouldn't have been as receptive, I feel, in that time, just because of everything that was going on
5 years ago.
Exactly, right? And I think, and I use the example loosely of the Chappelle show. I don't know if you guys remember the episodes, and like originally how Dave Chappelle originally started that, and what his overall goal was. He wanted to bring to light racially charged topics to the public in a way where it was like, okay, I'm presenting these issues to you in a comedic manner, but I want you to get to the point where you're questioning, why am I laughing at this? Why is this so funny? And there was a time when Dave Chappelle was kind of battling that, where it was just like, kind of like, okay, well, am I going too far? Am I pushing the envelope with this whole concept to the point where people are not getting it? Why all of this is humorous, and they're like, am I making a mockery out of my own people, essentially? But his original goal was like, if I present this in a serious manner, where it's like you're talking about police brutality, or you're talking about like racism and things of that nature, like white privilege and all that shit, right? If you present it in a serious way, it's almost like it's uneasy for people and very unsettling for them to be receptive to that kind of information. But if you give it to them in a subtle and comedic way, it kind of breaks through the barriers and breaks through that filter, and they're able to then conceptualize it and be like, oh, okay, this is funny, but why is it funny? And then they start to kind
attacked.
Of, yeah,
it's not a defensive reaction. They're kind of like letting it in and then thinking about it.
Exactly. So to my point in regards to this, the way Stan Lee, at least how I interpret it, in terms of how he's petitioned like his this property, is, the civil rights movement is going on right now. You have these two leaders who have similar ideologies, but they're going about it in a very different way. Like Martin Luther King was nonviolent, and Malcolm X was by any means necessary type of thing. So they had opposing propositions in terms of how they wanted to handle this situation. Malcolm X was he's to a certain degree had disdain for white people and the heinous things that they were doing to his people, to the point where that's why he took his stance on by any means necessary. I am going to fight for my people by any means necessary. Whereas Martin Luther King was all about, no, we can do this in a peaceful way with protest, and by making people realize the error of their ways and come to a common ground and be civil. Malcolm X wasn't about that. He was like, yeah, you're living a fallacy, right? And so I see the parallels in terms of Professor Xavier and Magneto in that regard. Obviously,
Yeah.
you know, it's they're exaggerating the material gradually as the comic book series goes on, right? And not Malcolm X, Magneto became somewhat of a I guess would you call him a terrorist or extremist or
Yeah, he is
you
a
know,
terrorist.
yeah. So they kind of took it to that next level, but the original source or the original idea stemmed from these two public figures, and I think that was a way for, you know, us as like I think that was a way of the creator to soften the blow and let people know what's really going on, because although these are stories, like part of the reason why we read these comic book stories or stories in general that are like fictional is because we connect to them, we relate to them in some capacity, right? And you know, even if it's a fantastical world, there's still elements of truth there, right? Like look at what we were talking about with WandaVision and the whole concept of grief. Yeah, it's built and structured around this whole fantastical world, but at the end of the day, it's like, why do we connect with that series as a whole? Because we've all suffered from some sort of trauma in our life in some form or another, right? Same with your favorite movie or whatever, like whatever you're into, right? There's something that's connecting you and linking you to that movie in some capacity, right? So I think that was kind of its Stan Lee's way of like letting people know what's really going on, but like putting it under smoke and mirrors, kind of like to hide the fact, okay, like pay attention, because even though this is a fictional thing that you're reading, this shit is really happening. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that answers the question, but that was just kind of my view on the whole thing. So
I want to jump in on that point though. Like, if Stan Lee and the other creators' vision was to input this narrative of like what's happening in the Black community, then they would fail dramatically because they had nothing to truly articulate that. Like, that point about Martin Luther and Malcolm X has to be explained for people to go, oh yeah, I see it. They would never see it beforehand because it was never included. Like, you can't put white people and a white people's historical struggle into that story and then go, oh yeah, this very clearly painted situation of Nazis and Jewish, that also sounds like this other thing you have not mentioned anything about. Like, people could, especially for people who had the historical belief that Malcolm X was a terrorist, and people who probably thought the same thing of Martin Luther, they're not drawing these conclusions without someone drawing a strong line. I also want to transition to the thing is like, well, and your Umar, you were mentioning your friend saying like, would this be the right time to also to do this, and would it be a good time to cast them as Black characters? I personally would love to see Black actors casted. I would love it to be two individuals, one who sided more with Martin Luther and one who sided more with Malcolm, and they came from the era. Not people who, not those exact characters, but one of the reasons why I'd want them to be people who sided with at like 70-30, 60-40. And what I mean by so is like, one, it's not like they have to be completely under the umbrella of the person they sided with. I think they're being gray, and it's been like, how many years since then, that would open up a very interesting dialogue. The reason why I think this would work is not because I want like, oh, it's the right time to cast Black people in these roles. That's actually not even the reason for me why I think it's strong. I think Wakanda laid a great seed with Killmonger, with the whole statement of what had been, how you neglected. So having the people of Wakanda just open up their borders and they said, hey, look to the world, and having these mutants come out and be like, where were you? And having them have opposing ideologies, but actually having a lot more overlap than Professor X and Magneto did, where there's a lot of things they would agree to, and a lot of things they were like, yeah, no, we're on the same page with this. But other things where they don't agree, and it doesn't have to be quite as extreme. at times. I don't know like how you want to write that story. I kind of feel like you don't have to make in this world of the MCU, you don't have to make Magneto as big of a villain because you have bigger fantastical villains. So I think that you can play something of an anti-hero that in some rumor fashion. But I think there's a really good thread of conversation from the Wakanda part of it. But also at the same time, if you don't make them so upholding to Malcolm X and Martin Luther's ideology, you won't end up making their characters more about the black struggle and forgetting the mutant struggle that's also going to be going on. I think that it's you don't need to make analogies anymore. You actually get these characters say, as both a black man and a mutant, I have a perspective on this situation, right? Instead of just being like, as a mutant, aka mutants are like black people, like
No,
like you just put it out there.
Yeah, and I agree, but you couldn't have done this back then. You couldn't have
No.
done that back then. So
You couldn't have done it, but you also didn't. They didn't draw any strong parallels that don't need somebody to give you an article or an explanation for you to have seen the parallels at all.
Yeah, I would say that. Like,
yeah, but at that time though, like if it like do you run the risk of laying it on too thick to the point where you don't even make sales because nobody cares once they get an inkling of, oh, this is talking about shit I don't care about, or shit that doesn't resonate with me, so why am I even gonna bother? I
depends
feel
on
like
what their goal was. It depends on what their goal was. If their goal was just to be like, we're just taking some inspiration, we're writing a completely different story, but we like something about these people and we're going to utilize them, they achieve their goal. If their goal was to put any idea into people's minds and hearts about the black struggle, they completely failed at that. And they didn't not lay it on thick. They didn't lay it on at all. There was
so
literally
how would
nothing.
you have gone about that then? How would you have
I don't know exactly how I would have gone about it, but they did nothing.
I don't think the point was to kind of like represent the civil rights movement. I think it was more the civil rights movement and these characters and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King gave them the idea of positions of people who are experiencing prejudice. And so for them back in the day, the one that was the easiest and probably the most non-polarizing idea is, Nazis are bad, Jewish people suffered, and like, extermination is not a good thing. So like they went like bare bones, easy, let's just feed it to children sort of style. Now we're kind of in a significantly, and I mean significantly more complicated world with and also an immensely more diverse world. And also in the last 3 years, like there has been a lot of video evidence proving a lot of facts about prejudice and systemic racism in the West that people didn't know about, or I should say the general public refused to accept.
Yeah.
So now is the time where I would say making them black, like as it is, people are frustrated with the MCU saying like, stop politicizing our films and our like TV series. We stop changing them from like males to females. Stop making them black when they weren't black before. There's always going to be those people, but I would say that right now it's kind of really hard to accept that all this is made up and that this is just like some sort of like just a few bad apples. No. Enough people know that this is a real thing. And I see what you're saying, Tactix, about like being too on the nose. So like I guess instead of like just focusing on black people, you can kind of make it a minority issue. And also systemic racism, because like frankly, like every country has some level of systemic prejudice, whether it's towards women or minorities or both. So you can make an X-Men, a Professor Xavier and a Magneto. Hell, you can even make Magneto a female, for crying out loud, or make them both female, for crying out loud, or people of color, and like maybe the X-Men are actually all people of color. Then again, then you're kind of excluding white people, which kind of goes back to what Tactix was saying about you're not going to sell anything if that's what you're going to do in the West. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think now is the time we can push it. I don't think I don't think the MCU or any studio is brave enough to do that with X-Men, but I do want to go back just briefly in terms of Professor Xavier's idea of peace. What do you both think of it? Because now that I'm thinking about it, I do see that it's a kind of privileged position because he does come from privilege. Aside from being white and a male, he comes from a rich family. He came from a wealthy family, and even in X-Men First Class, they Magneto even said something along the lines of I never would have known that you have come from such hardship, as a sarcastic comment to him. He grew up in Nazi Germany prison camps, and Charles was in a mansion in Westchester. So Darcy, what do you think on that?
Yeah, the whole privilege part, I don't think it's the thing I dislike the more I see it over time is that he's too passive in his actions, and it's not from a privilege perspective, so for instance over minorities specifically, but it's just for the group of mutants he's not doing enough. And
he is in a wheelchair. I'm just saying.
No. I don't mean from a fighting perspective. I mean, I'm
just fucking with you.
Yeah, I know. But from a speaking up perspective, for instance, a lot of depictions we've had. Now, let's be honest. A lot of these recent live action films haven't been doing well in any capacity. But Magneto's taking action, regardless of it being good. He's actively moving, and the Professor X character is kind of waiting around for something to happen. Okay, if humans aren't saying nothing right now, nothing happened, probably a good thing. Versus they don't depict him enough going out and being an actual activist and taking action from a vocal perspective and bettering things and really working at it. You'll see light depictions of him working on policy or something, but
he's just taking care of kids. He's just taking care of runaways.
Yeah, and he's teaching them. It's more one is I'm going to try to change the world to help our people, and the other one's I'm going to teach you how to play along with people who don't like you. And I would wish that he would be I'm going to teach you reality, because if you want to take a parallels from a Black experience, it's I'm going to teach my kids the reality of the situation, and then I'm going to put my life on the line to try and actually change things in a positive, non-violent way. But I'm going to teach my kids how to be ready for the situation, because it's going to take a long time to fix the situation. And I'm going to hope that maybe before I die, or even way sooner, that my children will be able to live a much better life and through my efforts. And I just feel his character is I guess it's privilege in the way that he's well, I don't have to rock the boat because I've been so used to things being always good in my situation. I'm not really looking at how my children are affected properly. And so I find that part being annoying about his character as time progresses. And I identify more with Magneto, even if I don't agree with him.
How about you, Tactix?
So I agree and disagree with you guys, and here's why. I agree with you in the sense that, Professor Xavier's tactics are a little passive for the most part. However, if he was more assertive and active in his fight against the oppressed mutants and whatnot, we would just have another Magneto, and Magneto himself would then become obsolete, or one of them would basically cancel each other out. So you need opposition, because opposition between these two characters is what makes this a compelling story to begin with, right? Because it's either you get rid of Xavier and then you just have Magneto and his stance and no opposition, and then we don't really have an X-Men story. So I agree with you, but I think we need the counterpart to that, because now look at what we're arguing. Look at what we're talking about. We're talking about whose side, if this was reality, whose side would you choose? Would you choose Professor Xavier or would you choose Magneto? You need the opposition there.
But Magneto is more, well, again, like we're focusing on Magneto and Xavier, not on Martin Luther and on.
No, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah. So like, Magneto is, yes, he is aggressive. He is active, is like a mild way of putting it, but he's actually very destructive and active and stuff like that. You can do activism in a non-violent way, because like Professor Xavier in the films, at least in the comics, he's a little bit more activist, where he's like a known mutant who is known for having a school that takes care of like runaway mutants, but also he is trying to normalize mutancy. In the movies, they haven't really shown it that much, but then again, they don't have a lot of time to do so. Like they just kind of focus him on being a teacher. But like I see what Darcy is saying, where he's saying like if Professor Xavier was a little bit more activist, because like, do you guys know who the Morlocks are?
No, yeah.
Okay, so they're basically mutants whose like their powers are significantly more mutated than like the X-Men. Like the mutants in X-Men are kind of like, most of them can pass as normal people, but with the Morlocks, none of them can pass. They all live in the sewers, and like some of their mutant powers are so atrociously terrible. Like one's like basically their skin like excretes like, or like one of them is like a see-through. Their skin is see-through. Like that's their mutant ability. It's like, great, you can see my organs, my face, like my eyeballs, and my skeletal structure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna really pass in like normal sort of situations. So like X-Men kind of focuses on the pretty mutants, and I'm just want to say like, Professor Xavier could try to normalize a little bit more actively in the movies, and it does kind of seem like he just lets people get killed as long as they're not in his school.
So the thing that I'm hearing you guys say is that basically we have a two sides of the same coin situation. Both of them are in their extremes, where one is super passive and the other one is super aggressive, right?
Yeah.
So, while you guys are kind of more leaning towards Magneto, in a perfect world, you're like, you want that balance of the two.
So okay, then here's my question: how would you depict a modern day, or I should say, a modern day Black Magneto and Xavier? Like, how would you depict their positions?
I like the way they're depicted in. I like the way that they were depicted in the animated show, because I never read the comics, so I don't have a reference to pull from in that regard. But I'm familiar with the animated show, and I liked their depiction, the 90s one, and even X-Men Evolution. From what I remember, I thoroughly enjoyed that show. So I would pull from that source material and just keep it the way it is. I agree with you guys in the sense of, in the movies, Professor Xavier is not depicted very well, and he does come off as privileged and very passive, and he's not the greatest representation of Professor Xavier in my opinion. But in the animated shows, I thought he was fine, and I thought that his stance on what he believed and what he was doing was righteous. But overall, like, you essentially want a combination of the two, because you can agree they both have valid points in their ideology. It's just they're very obviously, Magneto is very emotionally charged, and that's what's leading to his tyranny. And then Professor Xavier, he's got an altruistic viewpoint that's sometimes a little bit skewed and unrealistic, and so it leads him astray a lot of the times. And so you want a common balance of the two, where they meet somewhere in the middle. And that's why sometimes when they have those moments where they're like teaming up, so to speak, like it works, right?
Darcy?
So I'm gonna take the parallel back to Martin Luther. I want Professor X to have a little bit more Martin Luther, or this is gonna sound funny. I just gotta pull the name so I don't get it wrong. Here for a second. Or a little bit more Captain Jean-Luc Picard. So what I mean by it is like a mix of the two. So like, I would like him to be more motivational and vocal in the world, and he's still a pacifist. He's still not trying to take action scenarios, other than he's trying to be vocal. And the Captain, like Jean-Luc Picard part is, when it comes down to it, he's decisive when he has to do something. But when, even to the very end, to the most difficult parts, Captain Jean-Luc Picard would make these decisions and these communications that are almost at a T'Challa level, right? Where it's like, he would be diplomatic and communicate and be empathetic in situations. And I mean, that's obviously why, you know, Patrick Stewart was cast, right? Yeah. He represented that already, and so it made a lot of sense. But I would feel like that they need to pull more from that and have a character, regardless of you know, race or whatnot, that is more vocal, and that brings them a little closer to the center than on the extreme. And then that makes you need to bring Magneto a little closer to the center, in that I would love to see them both in situations where they're having a debate, right? Like, let's say there's a first movie and they're not quite in the throes of the war, and there's a lot of like public dialogue with them, and they're oppositing each other, but there's some level of common ground and there's some level of respect, even though they can't side, which makes a more interesting dichotomy when they battle out throughout more films and more properties later as time progresses. I just want to see him be more motivating. Right now, in a lot of recent depictions, he's just like waiting for shit to happen and reacting to it, which makes him kind of useless for me, and lacking of substance that I want from him, other than him and Logan, which he's awesome in that, but for a completely different set of reasons. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's pretty dope. Actually, I like hearing all that. So we got deep in this one.
I mean, what do you expect?
All right.
Is that how we're ending it? Just like,
I didn't know where to go with this.
Like, no one said shit. You're just like, all right, okay. I guess that's it, folks. All right. Well, this has been another edition of the Geeky Bros podcast. I'm your boy Tactix.
Yo, it's just Darcy here.
This is Big Geek Umar, who's hoping that one day we will get our endings down. But live long and prosper, you all. Oh my God, I've lost my ability to speak.
Not today.
Live long and prosper, you all. And please like and subscribe.